With all the focus on the Republican campaign, it's easy to overlook there's still a country to run. President Obama delivers his State of the Union speech Tuesday night. Seated directly behind him will be the man pushing the GOP agenda, Speaker of the House, John Boehner. And Mr. Speaker, welcome back to Fox News Sunday.
Chris, always good to be with you.
President Obama has made it clear that part of his campaign for re-election is to go after the do-nothing Congress. In fact, he's already doing it. Let's watch.
When Congress refuses to act, and as a result hurts our economy and puts our people at risk, then I have an obligation as president to do what I can without them.
Question: how will you counter that line of attack?
Chris, 30 jobs bills passed over the last year in a Republican House of Representatives that are sitting in the United States Senate. 30. Our focus over the last 12 months has been on jobs. Our focus over the course of the next 12 months is going to be on jobs. The president asked us to extend the payroll tax credit, make sure that we extended unemployment insurance with reforms, and make sure that doctors that dealt with Medicare patients were adequately reimbursed. And he asked us to do it for a year. We did it for a year. It was the United States Senate who decided, oh, we're just going to do it for 2 months. We can't agree on how we're going to offset these costs. And so we'll just kick the can down the road. We've done our job for the American people. And the fact is this, Chris. The president's policies have failed to get our economy moving again. And as a matter of fact, it's the president's policies that have actually made our economy worse.
Okay.
It's time for a new direction.
Here is the problem. Several studies found that the Congress this last year, 2011, has been one of the least productive ever. Let's take a look. You passed, and when I say you, I mean the Congress, the House, and the Senate, 80 laws last year, and 20% of them were to name a federal building or other housekeeping measure. And here are the latest polls. The president's job approval is at 46%, congressional Republicans, 19%. Isn't Mr. Obama, rightly or wrongly, isn't he winning the battle for public opinion?
Is the measure of the job that Congress does the number of laws that we passed?
Well, it's a measure.
No, it isn't. Most Americans think we've got too many laws already.
Well, what did Congress do this year that was significant? Well,
the House passed
none of those got
bills
passed.
that will help our economy grow again.
But none of those got through.
Look at the United States Senate. We're doing what the American people are asking us to do. I made a commitment a year ago when I was sworn in as Speaker that our job was to listen to the American people and to follow their will. And that's exactly what we're doing. But the real facts are that the president's policies have failed to get our economy moving again. And the fact is they've made them worse.
But the fact is also, and I'm not saying you're right and the Senate is wrong or vice versa, but the fact is I don't have to tell you the art of legislating is the art of compromise, and nothing got done. Nothing got done on any of those jobs bills. And the question people are asking, sir, is, particularly in an election year, when you're already saying Obama's policies make things worse, will anything get done in Washington this year?
If the president will listen to his own Jobs Council and the report that they issued this week, many of the ideas in the president's own Jobs Council are bills that have already passed in the House.
Such as?
Take the issue of infrastructure. We got big problems with our highways and roads. We need to get those things done. When you look at the suggestions...
Well, he supported an infrastructure as part of his jobs bill.
When you look at the regulatory bills that have passed the House, same kind of suggestions coming from the president's own Jobs Council. Let's slow down the regulatory onslaught coming out of Washington. They talked about fundamental reform of our tax code. Absolutely critical if America is going to be competitive and we're going to have jobs for hardworking American taxpayers.
Big event Tuesday night, the State of the Union, and we know some of the broad outlines of what the president is going to say at the State of the Union. Let's go through them. More help for the middle class, such as aid for people going to college or who are having problems financing their home. Income inequality, he'll demand the wealthy pay more taxes. And once again, he'll propose a grand bargain to cut the deficit and avoid that $1.2 trillion in automatic triggers. Do you see a compromise on any of those issues?
You know, I've read a lot about what the president's going to talk about Tuesday night. And it sounds to me like the same old policies that we've seen. More spending, higher taxes, more regulations. The same policies that haven't helped our economy, they've made it worse. And if that's what the president's going to talk about Tuesday night, I think it's pathetic. I think it's time for the president to listen to his own jobs council. It's time to go in a new direction. We need to end the regulatory nightmare that's coming out of Washington, serving as a wet blanket over our economy. We need to work to fundamentally change our tax code.
But you're saying no grand bargain on the deficit?
Chris, I've tried. There ain't nobody in this town tried harder to come to an agreement with the president over solving our long-term deficit problem. And the facts are this. The president would never say yes to fundamental reform of our tax code. He asked for more revenue. I told the president, I'll put revenues on the table, but only if we're going to have fundamental reform of our entitlement programs. The president would never say yes, and then he wanted $1 trillion worth of new taxes. The problem in Washington is there's too much spending, and we've got to get our arms around it. The Republicans in the House and Senate are committed to real reform of our entitlement programs and real controls on spending here in Washington.
What about, to talk about an immediate measure, what about extending the payroll tax cut holiday for a full year, not just the 2 months? It runs out at the end of February. And are you, as part of that, going to attach the Keystone Pipeline, approval of the Keystone Pipeline, to a deal?
House already passed a bill that would extend the unemployment program and the payroll tax credit for a year. And it was offset with reasonable reductions in spending, most of them coming from the president's own budget. I'm hopeful that we'll get this finished as soon as possible. The Keystone Pipeline is the prime example of a shovel-ready project that's been through every approval process here in Washington. Every option is on the table. We're going to do everything we can to try to make sure that this Keystone Pipeline is, in fact, approved. It's 20,000 direct jobs. It's over 100,000 indirect jobs. And it's more energy independence for America, as opposed to forcing our friends across the border in Canada to run a pipeline out to the Pacific Ocean and sell it to the Chinese.
Well, you say all the options are on the table. Are you saying that you may link the Keystone Pipeline to extending the payroll tax holiday?
We may. But as I said, all options are on the table.
Now, here's an interesting question, because what you did this last time is you just said you have to disapprove it again in 2 months, and he disapproved it again as he had before. Why not demand that if he wants the payroll tax cut, he has to approve it? In other words, it comes with it. You want the payroll tax cut, the pipeline goes with it.
All options are on the table.
So you're suggesting it might not just be, because quite frankly, it seems like just a political statement. He can disapprove it and his measure goes through. You're saying that you might demand approval as a price for...
The Keystone Pipeline is a bipartisan issue in the Congress. Democrats and Republicans in the House and Senate, a lot of people don't want this pipeline built. And the president is just saying, hey, I'll take care of this, but I'll do it after the election. I don't want to irritate anybody who might think about voting for me. Listen, the president knows that the #1 issue in America is jobs. And here's an example of 20,000 direct jobs, over 100,000 indirect jobs. And it's time for the president to say yes. And as I said, all options are on the table.
Will the House pass a budget this year, and will it have serious entitlement reform in it again, such as last year's proposal by Paul Ryan for premium supports as a way to change and reform Medicare?
Well, that was one option on how we could save Medicare. There are other ideas. Paul Ryan and Ron Wyden, Democrat senator from Oregon, came up with a bipartisan proposal. The idea here is that we've got to make changes to Medicare, otherwise it will not be there for seniors who count on it.
So,
but we will do a serious budget. But also remember this. On Tuesday, it'll be 1,000 days since the United States Senate passed a budget. 1,000 days, and they have yet to pass a budget. How do you deal with our long-term fiscal problems that we have if you refuse to come to an agreement on a budget?
So I want to make it clear, because there had been some thought that maybe because of the hits that you guys took last year, you weren't going to pass a budget. You are going to pass a budget again this year.
Of course we are.
And how do you prevent Democrats from turning it again, particularly proposals like entitlement reform, into a political punching bag, as they did last year?
You know, I tell my members every day, if you do the right things for the right reasons, the right things will happen. Don't worry about it.
At a retreat that you House Republicans just held in Baltimore, you personally kept talking about oversight, holding this president accountable, and making this next year a referendum on Barack Obama's policies. It sounds to me, and I'm sure like to a lot of people, like you're basically saying this whole year is going to be politics.
No, not at all. I do think that it's part of our job in the Congress to hold the administration accountable. His policies have, in fact, made our economy worse. Our job is to, in order to change those policies, is to help people understand what the policies are and how they've made the economy worse. That's our job, and we're going to do our job. But in addition to that, we do believe the fundamental reform of the tax code is important. The American Energy and Infrastructure Jobs Act will be on the floor here in the next months. That will open up American energy production, use those new royalties to fund our aging roads and bridges. So there's a lot of work that is going to be done. And if the president will listen to his own jobs council, there will be an awful lot of unanimity between the bills that we're passing and what his own jobs council is calling for.
President Obama said this week in an interview that you two get along fine. He likes playing golf with you, but then he added this, put it up. No matter how much we yucked it up, he, Boehner, had trouble getting his caucus to go along with doing the responsible thing on a whole bunch of issues over the past year. And there is, Mr. Speaker, a perception out there, excuse me, that you would like to make a deal, but you're being held captive by the 87 freshmen in your House caucus.
Well, first thing, it's not our freshmen. The fact is that
you're being held captive by other people?
We have some members who always want to do more. And God bless them, I want to do more too. But that's not really an accurate statement. The problem is getting the president to say yes. If the president and I could come to an agreement on something, I don't think I'd have any problem
but he
selling
says that
it in the Congress. No, he wants to shove off his own responsibility for the lack of an agreement on me and my ability to deliver. If the president and I could come to an agreement, I have no doubt that we can get unanimity and bipartisan support in the U.S. House of Representatives and, for that matter, the Senate.
A number of members of your caucus, including a lot of those Tea Party freshmen, no news to you, were very unhappy with you for what they said was shoving the 2-month payroll tax cut extension down their throats. Have they agreed to go slower? Have you agreed to go faster?
Listen, we've had a lot of talks last year about how the year ended. Our focus this year, coming out of our retreat, is on jobs. As you mentioned earlier, legislating is about the art of the possible. And the art of the possible is to try to find some common ground with this White House. The American people don't care about Democrats or Republicans. They don't care about the squabbles that get won. They don't care about our ideological corners that we sit in. At the end of the day, they expect us to find enough common ground to be able to move forward. And my job is to work with the president and to work with my colleagues on both sides of the aisle to do what the American people want us to do: create more jobs.
Are you convinced that your caucus goes along with that? It's the art of the possible, not the art of the ideal?
I sure am.
Finally, your number two, House Majority Leader Eric Cantor, suggested this weekend at the retreat that he'd like to see the presidential race end sooner rather than later because he said that it's important that the Republicans put up a clear choice against Barack Obama. Does Newt Gingrich's victory yesterday, and I'm not singling him out, he just happened to win, but the fact that there's probably going to be a longer, rougher, tougher primary, does that hurt Republicans?
Well, I think the fact that we've had 3 primaries, 1 caucus and 2 primary elections, and we have 3 different winners, I think it shows the vibrancy of the Republican Party. And while, yeah, everybody'd rather have it over sooner rather than later, the fact is that those who show up in Republican primaries around the country are going to choose our candidate. Not going to be chosen by a handful of people in Washington, not going to be chosen by me. It's going to be chosen by Republican voters. And I trust the judgment of Republican voters, and I'm as anxious as anybody else to see who our nominee is going to be.
Speaker Boehner, we want to thank you so much for coming in today. We will be watching you sitting right behind the president on Tuesday night.
I'll be right in my chair.
Do you have any problems about possibly falling asleep? Is that a?
No.
Do you do something? Do you pinch yourself or bite the inside of your cheek?
No, I just do not want to be the issue, and so I can tell you all about the back of the president's head.
You just sit there and
look right at it.
Mr. Speaker, thank you very much.
Thank you.
As always. Coming up, Newt Gingrich wins big in South Carolina.